Adequate notice of this meeting, as required by the Open Public Meetings Act, was provided through the posting, mailing, and filing of the annual notice of regularly scheduled meetings of the Town Council on December 11, 2019. The notice was, on that date, posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, provided to the Westfield Leader and the Star Ledger, and filed with the clerk of the town of Westfield. So good evening, everybody, for those that are joining us virtually. Thanks for being with us. Mrs. Rowley, may I have a roll call?
Mayor Brindle?
Here.
Council members Habgood?
Here.
Parmalee?
Here.
LaGrippo?
Here.
Katz?
Here.
Mackey?
She's muted.
Here. Here.
Contract?
Can you not hear me?
Here.
No, I can hear you. Dardia?
Here.
Boys?
Here.
All right, excellent. So now we're going to attempt to take our Pledge of Allegiance. I brought a flag. I think Councilman Doherty has a flag. So I'll leave it here. So if we can do the Pledge of Allegiance together, that would be great. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're starting to get the hang of this. Jim, why don't we start with you in terms of some updates?
Sure. A couple quick updates, Mayor. The Conservation Center, first update. First of all, I want to thank DPW employees, Greg O'Neill, Supervisor Rich Eubanks, Police Department personnel that were there, as well as the over 1,000 residents that have purchased Conservation Center permits in the past weeks. We've had very smooth operations with on the last 2 Thursdays and Fridays. So much so that the guys at the center, the DPW employees, think the online purchasing is the best thing we've done. So it's really working very well. And again, just for some context, we normally sell about 1,000 to 1,100 permits in the month of April normally, and we've sold over almost 1,050 already in less time with less days. So it really speaks to the people who really wanted to use it, and to our staff that process it in a very orderly fashion. So the good news I want to share tonight is that, again, it'll be contingent upon the budget going through tonight on first reading, but while we made a lot of cuts, and we'll go into the budget discussions a little bit later, we did save money. We like to open up the center at least starting on Saturdays, this coming Saturday. So Thursdays and Fridays, and starting this Saturday, 9 to 3, the normal hours. Still keep Sundays closed because we still don't have confirmation that we're going to get the Clean Communities grant yet from the state. It looks very good, but we'll know better. But at least for this Saturday, we like to open up the center and then basically allow people to use the center. People can buy permits now that couldn't buy them for weekends if they needed it. And then we'll revisit the Sunday hours shortly, after we hear from the state. Also, we like to discuss and try to see if we can get the bulky waste program up and running. It was a very successful program the past few years. I've been looking into it. We think we can sell bulky waste permits online as well. So we're working on that. So probably another week or so away from announcing the date of sale there. But thanks to the employees and to the residents who bought permits, I think it's working very well. Everyone's taking social distancing very seriously, which is great news. So anyway, those are some great things about the center. 2 other quick updates. Minnewaska Park. Today was one of the first nice days in a long time without any rain. So our contractor was able to get into Minnewaska and do a lot of work today. Chris was out there today with them. They have got a lot of the pathways already removed. They've cut in some new pathways that we're putting in specifically by the playground, and they're moving ahead. So great news is the pathway project is underway. And then once that's finished, we hope within a few weeks, we will then have the park drive will be paved, which is something that's been waiting now for a couple of years. So that's great news. That job can continue. And in addition to that, Chris is working with a contractor to install the water fountain that was donated the water fountain and dog fountain that was donated by Columbia Bank to us. It's also going to be installed hopefully within a few weeks in the park as well. So those are great things happening. And hopefully we have more nice days and less rain, although the rest of this week looks like a little rain. And one other good news thing, the kiosk. The train station is almost complete. Had a lot of big progress the past few weeks. The very heavy lifting of the utility lines, the drainage lines, the plumbing lines, all those things have finally been done. The fencing is down. Only we're waiting for now is some additional interior renovations, which are going on. And then we're working with the design team of the WC offices to pick the final paint colors to paint the exterior and interior of the kiosk. So we hope that within a few weeks that can be done, if not sooner. They'll be able to go out to RFP and bid for a vendor that can be lined up to be ready to go once we get people back on trains and get things back to normal. But it's really exciting. And if you haven't had a chance to go out there, drive by, the kiosk looks very good, and it hasn't even been painted yet. So thank you, Chris, for all the work you've been doing. With the utility work was very difficult to navigate, but that now is basically done, which is great. So those are the main updates. There'll be more to come in the budget discussion, Mayor, of course.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. And I'll just ask the council persons, whoever's not on speaking, if you could just mute your phone, that would be great, or computer or whatever. So I'll just give a little bit of an update. Thanks again to everybody for joining us virtually tonight. As you can see at home, I am joined by the entire town council here on video. We always have Jim Gilday, our clerk Tara Raleigh, Chief Batalora, town planner Don Samet, town attorney Tom Jardim, town engineer Chris McAloon, and many of our remaining department heads are all listening in with all of you. So please remember that public comment will only be accepted via Zoom, although we are live streaming for viewing only on Facebook. The replay will also be available afterwards on Facebook, YouTube, and TV36. And for those of you who received the regular COVID-19 emails, tonight's comments will also serve as today's update. And as a reminder, Jim and I are the hosts tonight. We're the Zoom hosts, if you will, and we're going to try our best as a council to adhere to Robert's Rules of Order. So the council is going to make a request by speaking, by raising their hand. So if you wonder what's going on, that's what's happening there. So, so regarding our update for our COVID update. So as of today, there are 113,856 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in New Jersey, with another 718 still under investigation. Currently, the county reports 12,188 cases, with Westfield reporting 2 more today, bringing our case total to 216 to date. The last time we held a town council meeting, our first Zoom session, there were 68,824 cases in New Jersey with 146 in Westfield. So we've had about 60 more since then. So you can always go to the New Jersey Department of Health COVID-19 dashboard for breakouts. On the state side, today, Governor Murphy introduced the members of his Restart and Recovery Commission, who will advise on issues of public health, workforce development, and transportation, seek ways to maximize federal support, review potential long-term investments, and ensure that restart and recovery works for every family. The governor also, very importantly and very relevant to us, signed an executive order permitting municipal governments to extend the grace period for property tax state payments due until June 1st. As you know, they were due next week. And the grace period was until May 10th. Under existing law, municipalities are only allowed to allow grace periods for up to 10 days. We just found this out about 3 o'clock this afternoon. And as a result, we will be adding a resolution to tonight's agenda, extending the second quarter tax payment grace period to June 1st. And we'll expound on that a little bit more in the budget presentation. On the local front, today I signed a proclamation to honor the dedication and commitment of all of our grocery store employees in town. They also are unsung essential workers during this crisis who are very essential to letting us and keeping us safe at home. These employees have been met with unprecedented challenges, from tremendous increases in demand to social distancing operating modifications. And they've continued to work diligently to enable all of us in the community to secure our basic necessities amidst this pandemic. So we're going to be posting the proclamations for both Trader Joe's and Stop and Shop on our website as a sign of our ongoing gratitude for their continued commitment. And I do want to thank in particular Councilwoman Dawn Mackey for initiating this and interacting with those essential grocery stores and really advocating for the workers and really for all that they've done. So thank you, Councilwoman Mackey. As you can imagine, I receive a lot of questions regarding our reopening plans, the timing of which will be primarily driven by the state. The governor unveiled a plan yesterday, which provided the metrics that will determine when things can reopen regarding, metrics for caseloads and so forth. But the timing of which remains uncertain, which I know is frustrating for everybody. Everybody just wants to know we'll be open on a definitive date. And unfortunately, that's what's so challenging about this crisis, is that there is so much uncertainty around it. I also do receive many questions about the reopening of our parks. And many residents want to happen now, but quite frankly, I have many residents who strongly favor waiting longer. So I remain concerned that Westfield continues to experience a consistent amount of new cases, with only a small percentage coming from long-term care facilities, indicating that community spread is still happening. Of our 216 cases, I think there's 31 that are coming from long-term care facilities. So it is definitely not representing any growing measure of our cases. So we remain concerned that if we reopen our parks in advance of the county parks, it's going to push crowds to ours, particularly as the weather improves. So even now, we are seeing people violating the park closures, and the police department has begun to utilize drones with recorded siren and message for additional enforcement. So once the parks are opened, our police need to be confident that they have the capacity to manage crowds and ensure social distancing. I've also had people say, why don't we just start fining them? And I just remind people, we don't want to fine people as a revenue source for the town. If you're fining people, it means it's almost too late to mitigate the behavior you're trying to prevent. So we really are trying to not facilitate anything that might actually get people to want to actually be close together. And even if 95% are in compliance, and I think we are, there's still that 5% that can make it dangerous for anybody still. So we're monitoring the data all the time, and we are discussing a reopening plan for the parks. It will most likely be done in an incremental fashion similar to how they closed, which was done in coordination with the Board of Ed and consideration of the county closures and other practices in surrounding municipalities. So just to manage expectations, we're not there yet, but the parks reopening is something we evaluate and plan for on an ongoing basis with input from Administrator Jim Gilday, our Chief Batalora, our Regional Health Officer Megan Avalone, and members of the Town Council. So one of the key indicators we'll continue to watch is the prevalence of community spread and when those cases mitigate. And this is hard. I know it's hard. Listen, my son just got a new bike. I just got a new tennis racket. No one wants to be in the parks more than me. And I'm sure all the council members sitting up here. So I say this as your mayor, I think, who has been very upfront with the community from day one of this crisis. When you are asked to make sacrifices, you expect nothing but the truth in return. And that is, and always been, my commitment to you. So I will continue to focus on facts, guided by values and principles, not politics or popularity. And I'm looking forward to when we can pivot from saving people to serving people, which is just on the horizon if we can hang in there for just a bit longer. And that leads me to the introduction of our 2020 budget, which is the primary purpose of tonight's meeting. You will see when we take you through it that it reflects a lot of revenue uncertainty stemming from unknown tax collection rates and lost revenue from sources like parking, courts, construction, investments, and the pool. We have cut our expenses significantly and have a list of additional expenses that we are prepared to cut if receipts come in lower than anticipated. So since elected, my administration has strived to find the right balance between keeping an appropriate level of surplus for unexpected events and putting our taxpayer dollars to work for you. We've done that through expansive road paving, investment in equipment and automation, and using surplus to lower the municipal tax rate to 0 last year to mitigate uncertainty over the revaluation. This has all been accomplished while maintaining a 15 to 20% surplus level, which is important to maintaining our AAA bond rating. So we are very fortunate that we are in a strong financial position to weather this crisis in 2020. But the longer term view remains less certain, just as it does financially for many individuals and businesses, given the current economic environment. Municipalities have not been promised any financial assistance to offset pandemic-driven revenue declines. So we must be discerning, flexible, and methodical to determine the best path forward to deliver uninterrupted services to our residents. This unprecedented health crisis has further illuminated the challenges that I addressed at our March 10th council meeting, the last time we were all together, particularly regarding our over-reliance on revenue from discretionary sources. Every crisis also brings opportunity, and I look forward to working with the community to reimagine the possibilities for our recovery, and I'm confident that we will emerge stronger together with a bright future ahead. So in closing, before we hand it off to the budget presentation, I do have 2 acknowledgements I want to make. The first is I want to extend birthday wishes to Councilman Mike Dardia. Happy birthday, Mike.
Happy birthday, Mike.
And the second was to acknowledge a special coincidence that was brought to my attention earlier today. Today is not only National Workers Memorial Day to honor those killed, disabled, injured, or made unwell by their work, but it is also National Superheroes Day. And I know the community joins me in thanking all of our superheroes who are getting us through this pandemic, from the grocery store employees who we honor through a proclamation tonight, to postal carriers, first responders, medical professionals, and all our other essential employees who continue to rise to the occasion for the benefit of us all. So thank you from all of us to all of you. You truly are the superheroes of our world today. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it off to Linda, right?
Yeah.
I think Jim's going to put up the presentation, and Linda's going to kick off our budget presentation. So off to you, Linda.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor. Jim Gilday and I are going to partner in making this presentation tonight. And I think as soon as we get we're just going to screen share so that everyone can see the presentation. All right. Everyone seeing that? Okay, good.
Looks good.
And Jim Gilday, I'm going to need to rely on you on turning pages.
Sure.
Usually this is a little easier to coordinate, right, when we're standing in the council chambers, but we'll make do.
Okay.
So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone, for joining to go through the budget presentation tonight. Before I get started and talking about what the timeline and the process was that we went through this year, I wanted to acknowledge the other members of the Finance Policy Committee, council members Contract, Parmalee, and LaGrippo, who, along with our town administrator, Jim Gilday, and Scott Olson, who's our CFO, spent a lot of hours in town hall putting this budget together, not only once, but twice, because before we knew that we were going to be living in the middle of a pandemic, we had a budget pretty much ready to present to you in the middle of March. So you'll see from the timeline here that this process really started back in November, which is when we start taking a look at how we performed against the budget from, that we put together for 2019. And that's when the department heads start submitting their wish lists and their review and thoughts to the town administrator. Some of you on the Zoom interface or on Facebook tonight might have joined us at the end of January for the meeting that we did for public input on the, January 30th, which is when we have started a practice of looking back over the prior year and reporting to the town as to how we did against the budget. So we went through that process and opened up our budget at westfieldnj.gov email address to take in feedback from the public, because we always want this to be a very open and transparent process with all of you. The budget meetings in town hall on Saturdays and multiple evenings during the week started the day after that public input meeting and continued into the beginning of March, which always involves us meeting with each of the department heads and getting a chance to review the budgets that they've prepared with our town administrator's help. So as I mentioned, we were all ready to start presenting this in a conference session at the middle of March when all of a sudden things started to shut down and we budget timelines were delayed by the governor. So we asked Jim Gilday and Scott Olson to go back and take a look at where we could make cuts in the budget to provide some extra cushion and protections to us as we go through a year with a lot of unknowns, with the idea that, we might need to sharpen our pencil this year. So that is a process that we went through over the last several weeks. The council is quickly getting up to speed on where we stand. And we had a finance policy virtual meeting on Sunday to go through the final results and start putting this presentation together, which we're giving to you tonight. Tonight, we'll start taking our feedback from the public when we get to our public comments section. And then again, the budget@westfield.gov email address is going to be open for any comments or questions that you have, because the form budget will be posted on the website tonight, along with this presentation after the council approves it. And there will be a month between now and May 26th when the budget will go up for adoption. So this sort of sets the stage for everything, doesn't it? A little amoeba-like, character that seems to permeate every day of our lives. It obviously has permeated the process that we've gone through to determine what we should be presenting as a budget for this year. It's, I guess, most uncertain for us as it relates to what our revenue stream will be this year, as we spent the large majority of the last 2 months shut down without parking revenue coming in, and other things that are pretty easy to predict in more normal years. I guess the one thing that I really did want to mention is that the revenue that we have already accounted for as of tonight is at 32% of the budget that we're presenting tonight, which is pretty much on par with where we were last year. So I think that's our next good sign that with some of the adjustments we made to the budget, we'll hopefully be in good shape. We obviously needed to look at this budget not only as it relates to this year, but as to next year as well. And so a lot of things were taken into consideration, particularly as the mayor mentioned, we don't really know what federal or state assistance will be provided to municipalities. There was some work being done in Washington today that I heard about for talk about a $750 billion bill to help out municipalities, but none of that's done yet. And it was not available to us when we put this budget together. So I will say that you have our commitment as a town council to watch this budget very carefully as we go month to month and see how we're tracking against it, to see what other adjustments we might need to make, because there's a lot of things that we still don't know. But importantly to us is that we have a very strong surplus, and that will definitely provide us with some insurance and some ability to deal with problems that might still get thrown at us, and we'll continue to manage our finances in a way that's consistent with what the banks and the rating agencies expect of a AAA bond rated town. I'm going to let Jim walk through the next set of slides that go through the appropriations and the costs and some of the statutory required costs, et cetera, that we face this year, so you can get a better idea of exactly what we're looking at here.
Great, thanks, Linda. Yeah, so second time doing the budget this year. This slide talks about the things that the CFO and I work went through right away. A goal again is, get the lowest possible tax levy for residents, but also be mindful of where we, have to services we have to provide in 2020 and also look for 2021. So we reduced appropriations by 1.32%, despite a very large increase in non-discretionary expenses, which we'll see later, 2.32 increase in non-discretionary costs, but we still were able to reduce the budget. We also had to go to the revenue side, as Linda mentioned. There are some revenues we normally get, parking, court, construction, to name a couple, but also there's other revenues we get, interest on investments, interest on cost on taxes, to name others that we're just not going to get in the same numbers that we normally do because things are shut down and we don't know how long it's going to be. So we made some assumptions. We actually took out about $1.2 million of revenue in various categories to not only reflect what we might collect, but also to protect ourselves. One of the things in municipal budgeting is you cannot anticipate any more than you collected the year before. And so that's something we're gonna have to deal with in 2021, but we're mindful of trying to be as accurate as possible with the uncertainty that's on the line. So again, we reduced revenues. On the good news front, we did about $175,000 worth of sale of assets that are pending. For example, we've sold some equipment the chief of police has done, made about almost $50,000 there. We have some other small property purchases pending. So we are using some sale in the budget as a revenue, but that's money we're going to replenish in full by year end. And that's great news. So we can have that for use in future years. So based upon our reviews into the budget, we'll go in a lot more detail, but we're looking at a 1.95% tax levy increase, which is below the allowable 2% tax levy, and is of course less than the 2.7% inflation rate. So what else do? We reduced spending. Of course, we looked at all sections of the budget. One of the largest sections is our staff and employees. So we looked at reducing overtime, talked to all the departments, the big departments, and reduced overtime where we could. Deferred new hires. We had some attrition. We have some retirements. We're deferring hires. So we're able to reduce budgets there in those departments, but not getting rid of any services at this point. Avoiding layoffs and furloughs at this point as well, but it was very positive. On the operating expenditure side, you'll see a lot of detail we'll go through. We cut almost every department and some significantly, which you'll see. The biggest cut we had at our disposal was to reduce the capital improvement fund. As you probably recall, over many years, the luxury of providing pay-as-you-go capital improvement funds. We've been doing a lot of equipment replacement in the budget, which is a wonderful thing for us to do, which reduces our debt service going forward, also allows us to get things we need on an annual basis. Because that money was built into the budget, that was a large area, $1.2 million came out of that line item, and that was a major savings for us going forward, which is great. And the last big one is always a discussion we have, but it's very important, conserving surplus, because as Linda said, 2021 is going to be very difficult as well, no matter how quickly we come out of this pandemic. The effects of it will be felt for a while. So we had generated $2 million throughout the course of operations last year. So our surplus went from 9.5, which we had left over after the budget was introduced last year, and we generated 2, so we started off 11.5. This budget uses 4.5 million of surplus, which is a little bit less than we used last year, and reserves $7 million for use in 2021, which actually, comparatively speaking, is very healthy. So we feel pretty good about that, especially having to go through this in the pandemic. This slide, just a quick little recap. We had this slide last year as well, showing the tax levy increases for the number of years since 2012. 2012 was, of course, Hurricane Sandy year, and we all remember, but the budget, the levy has been going down ever since. We have obviously an increase this year in 2020, but the good news is, as I mentioned before, this increase is below the 2% allowable cap by the state of New Jersey. And our goal is to kind of be back on a trend where we can kind of bring that down by grading revenues, as the mayor mentioned before as well. Lots of things we'll discuss later in this presentation, but if we can generate revenue from other areas besides the things we've been depending upon, parking and courts and those things, larger revenues from development or other things, then we'll be able to change our fortunes going forward with not having to be so reliant upon those other revenues. So this is also an important slide. Again, this is a surplus slide. Again, a history of surplus. Again, the very bottom of the slide, 2020, we started off at 11.5. We're using 4.5. We leave 7 million in the bank, and we don't know yet what we're going to generate. Important note here, I think, we had this slide last year back to 2009, and normally we take off the year and show a 10-year history, but I left the 2009-10 on there. The reason it's important to show that is those that remember this, of course, 2009-10 were sort of the height of the recession back then. Of course, you know, times are different, but to give you a sense of the use of surplus that had to happen then and how much was left remaining. We hope not to get in that situation, and thankfully we're in a much better spot than we are now with the amount we have. But we're prepared to take action, and we have a lot of resources at our disposal if we need to do something. But it just kind of gives you some perspective. Not that long ago, the town didn't have very much surplus, and so again, good news now is compared to a lot of other communities, we're in very good shape getting through this pandemic and reserving 7 million going towards 2021, which is very important. See, and so we said the 7 million is still 15% of our current budget. Just a little reminder here again of just what the town council controls. This is the 2019 confirmed collections of the taxes for Westfield. And again, you'll see the municipal tax levy last year, 27,976,000, 15%, just a little, almost 16% of your total tax bill comes to the town. The library levy is almost 1.5%. The county and county open space is about almost 24%. And then the remaining 59% is the school district. Just a reminder, you'll hear this again at the end of the presentation, but it's more important now than ever. We are the tax collector. We collect all these money. So last year we collected 173 million to the tax office. We only kept almost 28 million of that. The rest we gave away, obviously, to the people that obviously have other taxes they depend on. But it's important to note that because we're the tax collector, we must pay the county and the school and the library whether we collect the money or not. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But again, this gives you a sense of the smallest portion that we control compared to the rest of what is collected. So here's just a couple of details of some of the revenues and expenses. So on the revenue side here, one second, let me go back. Okay, so on the revenue side here, we had to reduce revenue significantly due to the pandemic. So things like parking fees and meters are down 425,000. Sewer fee, of course, that was introduced earlier this year. That was an increase. That ends up being a huge, significant help to us right now due to this pandemic, which wasn't foreseen at that time. Building department fees down significantly. Miscellaneous fees and permits. This takes into account utility work, various things going on, and right now there's not a lot of operations going on. That's down significantly. Health service agreements is a one bright spot as well. Those are shared service agreements we have with other communities, and right now they're depending more than ever on our Board of Health. And so that's some increase, and we'll be looking at receiving reimbursements from FEMA and other places that we can to reimburse costs we have out of that department after this pandemic is over. Court, again, Linda mentioned it, of course, before fines, there's very little court. I do want to give a special shout out here. We have a new court administrator that just started, and her and the judge, as recently as this morning, held Zoom courts to do as much as we can under the proper guidelines by the state to create some revenue and some process to get the backlog of cases. So that's very important. And I'll mention this later, but we do have a new court administrator this year in the past number of weeks. We have a new tax assessor in the past number of weeks. We have a new construction official in the past couple of weeks. So despite the pandemic, there's a lot of human resource things going on. We're very fortunate with the people we've hired, and the court's one example of that. Cable franchise fees are set fees. We've already received those. They're a slight bit down from last year. Interest on investments, we do expect less. We're using more, so we have less to invest. And interest and cost and taxes, that's obviously just going to go down a bit based upon previous delinquencies. So again, revenues were a big hit, but necessary hit to protect us for this year and for next year. So on the appropriation side, just a reminder again of where the money goes. Again, in 2020, very similar to the 2019 pie chart. The main difference is the capital improvement fund piece of the pie is smaller. As we mentioned before, we cut out 1.2 million there because we had the opportunity to do that. And everything else is rather similar. Salary and wages make up 39% of our budget. Statutory required expenses make up 37%. Debt service, 7%. Operating expenses, 11%. And of course, we'll talk about it more, but the reserve for uncollected taxes, again, more important line item than ever, 5.5% of our budget is that. And that's because we are the collector. We must put in a reserve. So if we don't collect the taxes, we can pay school, county, and library. But it gives you a sense, the pie chart doesn't change that much, but the capital improvement fund is the biggest change there this year. On the appropriation side, again, just a comparison, past couple of years in large categories. Again, salary and wages overall up only 0.25% year over year. Operations, again, we cut significantly to bring it down, obviously less than last year. Debt service is up very slightly. Reserve uncollected taxes up slightly. Deferred charges is down. The big one, of course, is the statutory required expenses. We'll get into some of the detail on that. And the capital improvement fund is a big reduction. All told, we try to make as many cuts as possible to get us where we need to be. And so we're down 1.32%, or $614,000, which is a significant reduction. It's the first time we've had a reduced budget in about 8 years. So this is part of our required expenses that are we come to us as bills. So health insurance, we had a very difficult year this year. Bad experience in the past rating time frame. And so we've had very good experience over the years. This happens to be our bad year. We are currently in ongoing discussions to look at our health plan, see if that's proper changing it, working with our unions. So, but right now that's something we had to absorb this year. Rahway Valley Sewage Authority, RVSA, again, up 27% since 2016, another 5.5% increase in 2020, hence the sewer fee change and increase this year. Pensions are bills we always get. Overall, not a bad year for us pension-wise. Up 95,000 for the police and fire retirement system, and down 26,000 for the public employees retirement system. Utilities up a little over 2%. Social Security up, and other insurance. This is our workers' comp, umbrella policies, employment practice liability. One of the benefits of being in a joint insurance fund, we've been able to keep that cost rather stable. But again, statutory required expenses is the second largest main category in our budget, 37% of our budget. And this represented of the $1.3 million in non-discretionary expenses, this is over 1 million of it right here. So a little more detail on operations and what do we do? How do we cut the money out of the budget? And a lot of it came out of operations. So Public Works, in their operating budget, we cut about, $207,000. Things like eliminating the fall tree planting. Right now we're doing spring planting, which is great. But we had to eliminate the fall planting, the curbside bulky waste program. Luckily, we have the bulky waste program, which is highly successful at the Conservation Center. We were able to cut salt costs. We had a very mild winter, so that helped us cutting costs there. So those are some of the main items we cut on Public Works budget. Police, thanks to the recommendation of Chief Battalora, we're going to be leasing vehicles, replacement vehicles, rather than purchasing. That actually saved us a significant amount of money this year, and probably going forward as well, not just on vehicle costs, but potentially on maintenance and gasoline purchases as well. So more to come on that, but we did make some changes there. Some capital non-recurring items came out of the budget, and some reductions in parking administration. The building department, we usually use that department to replace vehicles, and we cut that out this year just to save money, obviously, and not needed right away. Health department, again, there's a big increase there, but again, 50,000 of that 56 is a complete offset with a public health capacity grant. that Megan Avalone, our health officer, got. We got this grant late December. We initiated it in January. Who would have known that the grant was for a communicable disease specialist? And so we have someone that's hired here that has actually been an excellent resource for us during this pandemic, which we never could have planned for. So while there's a big increase in that item, 50 of the 56 is offset completely by the grant. Administration, the administration section incorporates the administration department, clerk, collector, assessor, finance, and legal. And really the main increase here is just in some legal costs. We hired a new redevelopment counsel for things we'll talk about later about redevelopment processes. You need someone specialized in that. That's really makes up most of the increase here. Planning board, similar increase there. We had a major increase for hiring a redevelopment planner to assist Don and do some redevelopment planning for us. We also had a $30,000 savings from the master plan re-ex consultant cost dropping out last year. So some breakage there. Court, some small costs there. And crossing guard program, we do have a savings there. When the schools closed, obviously the crossing guards are outsourced program now. So the company is no longer billing us because the service is not being rendered. We hope to have that back as soon as the schools reopen, but there is savings from that. Public events, of course, we've had some public events canceled in a lot of our different things, so we have slight savings there. And the fire department, we did have a dropout of a study that was done in previous year for feasibility of a new firehouse, which we're still looking at. And of course, some capital non-recurring items and vehicle supplies came out. We are anticipating getting our new fire truck this year, so some of the vehicle supplies were reduced. So again, a lot of big cuts in a lot of these departments, and I want to thank the department heads. When we had to go back and look at this pandemic, I just had to make some calls, everybody, and have a meeting and say, help me. And everybody stepped up and said, hey, here's what you can do. And here's what we can offer you. And the CFO and I were very pleased with that. And again, it just shows the team effort being done here. Salary and wage detail. We have the police is the largest one. Again, that's realizing union contract negotiations, realizing new hires that were hired last year. Although we did reduce some overtime there to save some costs, but a big increase there. Health department, again, large increase, 45,000 of that 71 is offset by the grant. So the total grant for that Megan received was 95,000, 50,000 offset on operating, 45 on salaries and wages. So not too bad. Administration and building department, two examples of areas where there's transition costs for new hires. So the new assessor and new construction official, we had someone leaving with eligibility for some benefits, someone coming on before they left. So there's some increase in cost there. Public works, again, very well managed this year. Again, overtime reduction there, deferring of a new hire as well. So very manageable for a very large department. Engineering, 2% roughly. Court, again, not a big increase, but again, some transition costs there for the new court administrator. Recreation, fire departments, you'll see a lot of reduction there. And that's because we had retirement and some reassigning of staff to different areas. Thanks to Chief Tiller, we were able to save some money in 2020, which is great. So again, salary and wages, I think overall well managed for 2020. So again, I've always told the council this, and it's important that the public understand it as well. The budget is a plan. Scott Olson and the CFO and I always say the budget planning is never finished. While we have a budget that's introduced and of course gets adopted, the budget is never really done. It's a plan. And this year more than ever, it's a plan in the sense that while we are doing something tonight to introduce and ultimately hopefully we'll adopt something into May, we don't know what's going to be happening with this pandemic. We don't know what we're facing. We're trying to make it best educated guess as we can and educated decisions we have. But if we have something in the budget that we plan to do for one thing and times change, as Linda, or issues change, as Linda mentioned, we have the opportunity to spend that money on other things for transfer and other purposes. So this is a plan and we have flexibility. It's important for people to know that. And we're trying to not only get through the balance of 2020 successfully, but plan for 2021, which could be very difficult as well. So I'll just start off on this slide. I know Linda wants to make a few comments here as well. So things we're looking at, as I mentioned, for our flexibility going forward. And we have to monitor this literally every day and every week. The CFO and I are on this. We just gave an update to the Finance Committee yesterday of some cash flow analysis for their review. But a couple things we're doing right now, we'll be doing. As I mentioned earlier, we are having already ongoing discussions to seek different health insurance options, whether that be different carriers, plans that requires union information, cooperating with the unions and so forth, which we're doing. But that could be a big savings for us, not only maybe next year, but also possibly even this year. So that's ongoing. We're discussing Senior Housing Corporation has come to us for a new lease. We're discussing lease terms with them, and which may bring additional revenue to the town. There's also leaf collection. Of course, this always comes up when you have situations like this, but the committee and the Public Works Committee, Finance and Public Works, I've talked about looking at leaf collection, analyzing that program. Is there other ways we can do that? Maybe a lot less costly, different lower cost alternatives to do that. Again, we've been fortunate not to have to deal with this yet, but as a last resort, we may have to look at furloughs, adjustments to current benefit packages. I can recall being here in 2010 when the economic crisis was hitting 2008, 9, and 10, and it was a last resort, but we did have to go to the unions and non-union employees and say, hey, we don't want to have layoffs. What can we do to avoid that and can work with us? And thankfully back then, and I would expect nothing less if we have to get there, we'd have the same conversations here. We're not there yet, but we could be, and I'm sure people have heard around the state that these conversations are happening everywhere. We also are looking at future solutions as well. Solar solutions, we're about to issue an RFQ for a consultant to come on at no cost to the town to start advising us on possible solar opportunities for us that could save the town money and its utility costs going forward. In addition to that, talking to our crossing guard company as we get ready to renew a contract for the fall under unprecedented circumstances, but looking to maybe restructure the program in September. And lastly, evaluate Memorial Pool. A lot of questions coming up about the pool. The pool was part of the budget submission to the state, but of course the pool is a public utility. So it is a separate budget that is not supported by tax dollars. Rather, it's supported by membership revenue. So again, like everybody else, the pool is very near and dear to my heart, and it's very important that we try to plan accordingly, but we're going to be guided by state mandates, state guidance for public gatherings. But right now, we've adjusted the pool budget as best we can, planning to move forward, and we have the ability to be flexible, whether to have a shortened season, shortened hours, a regular season, if we're lucky enough, or if it came to it, a mandate not to open, and we'll be able to plan for that. But we're trying to be very flexible. And last thing to say is I've talked to administrators across the state. People have pools, golf courses, summer camps outside, lakes. We're all in the same boat. We're waiting for guidance, waiting to see what we can and can't do. But we want to actually, we're one of the few. We have over 8,000 members that join our pool. We're no small facility, so it's a significant operation. So thanks to Heather and Don from Recreation for working with us on that, and hope we can do something there. So some of my comments, Linda, if you want to say a few words on this slide too.
I think that's great, Jim. And I think the overriding theme here is that we're being very proactive. That we definitely appreciate the role that we play in managing the taxpayers' monies, and that we want to be prudent in the way that we're dealing with the situation that we're facing. But at the same time, there are things that we can be doing to plan for the future, and we're going to keep working on those things. So when there are revenue opportunities that we can start ushering in, we're going to look at those. When we need to be making decisions, a few weeks or a few months further down the road, we're going to take a look at everything from a cost benefit analysis side. We want to provide good and great services and good, strong fiscal stewardship as we move forward through the year. The bottom of the slide talks about, and it's really important to mention that, we have master plan and parks plan priorities that we also are going to be doing a lot of planning around this year, so that once we have a better idea of where we stand, we can start making some, start taking some specific steps to, look at the, fields and, other things that, we want to be making investments in. And so we're not going to be, spending a lot of money on those things in the next couple of weeks, but as we have better information, we'll use that to our advantage. And we certainly are using all the time to plan, because planning is free. And then we can be better prepared for next year.
Okay.
So the mayor mentioned at the beginning of this meeting tonight that there was a new executive order issued by the governor today, allowing us to extend the grace period for second quarter tax payments. And so we will pass a resolution tonight that will allow not just the 10-day grace period that we normally offer to taxpayers, but that it'll extend all the way through June 1st. We hope that anyone who needs that extra time to pay can take advantage of that. As it is important to understand that we don't really know where we might stand for third quarter payments or the last quarter payments of this year, because as the tax collector, we do have to make payments to the school district and the county, regardless of whether we actually collect them from town. And so even though the governor extended, the grace period, allowed us to extend the grace period, that doesn't mean that the payment that the town has to make to the school district or to the county are getting moved. So as you'll see in this slide, those payments will happen on the 7th of May and on the 15th of May, regardless. And so that's
Just
we're gonna-
I'll just mention one other thing on that topic is that we have other, the school and county are our big payments in May, of course, every month. We also have pension bills to pay, which is the state requirement. And some of these payments, county and pension, for example, interest accrues if you're late, and that hasn't changed either. So good news is, I think it's important to note that as of the end of today, we had collected about 1/4 of our quarterly taxes, about a little over 25%. And we still haven't received some of the larger escrow payments, which most people like myself pay through escrow. So we think we'll be okay for a good majority of the payments. The question will be timing of the remainder of payments that normally come in. Are they going to come in later now? There's an extended grace period, but we should be okay for this quarter. But as you said, Linda, everyone I've talked to around the state is concerned about the third quarter, and that's something we're watching very closely.
Right.
Forget all the bad news. There's some good.
I know. Let's talk about some good news, because even though, as a town, we've been facing things that, we never could have dreamed, would happen. Instead of the town of Westfield, feeling sorry for itself or, looking at all the downsides, there's been an incredible amount of silver lining that we've seen all over town. And so we thought it was important, in this presentation to acknowledge some of the efforts that we're seeing and some of the bright lights. So the We Love Local Fund that was kicked off by a porch concert by the lead singer of the Goo Goo Dolls, John Resnick, who lives in town. When we started, that process, we thought perhaps, there would be enough money to match the initial, $15,000 match that the United Fund from Westfield agreed to provide. That was further matched. That was furthered by a match offered by the Westfield Foundation, and all told to date, $235,000 has been raised, and over 160,000 businesses have received support to date. That means that we hopefully the local businesses are, feeling the strength of the community and the support for them, not only, through the donations, but just, through the whole process. So we thank everyone who's participated in that in small and large ways. And that applicate, just so you know, that application deadline for any businesses in town who would like to apply ends this Friday. Actually, I think it might even be it's the end of the month, so it's Thursday.
Thursday.
You know, so if you would like to submit an application, please do. We still have monies coming in, you know, every day. In fact, you know, one of the contributors that we have for that We Love Local Fund is the Fortnite fundraiser, which is also noted on the slide, which is a couple of teenagers who decided that they could raise some money to pitch in too. And so I think they're close to $2,000 that they've raised. There have been people, Joe Mendak and his family have been painting pallets and making them into signs and contributing those dollars. I mean, the list goes on and on.
And Linda, let me just mention Burham at Outahan Pizza is also having a fundraiser tomorrow night. And it's great because he's obviously one of the businesses that is you know, has publicly talked about how he's benefited from We Love Locals. He's trying to pay it forward. So Outahan Pizza tomorrow night, a certain percentage of his proceeds is going to We Love Locals. So please order your pizza tomorrow night from Outahan and help out. So. And
my only advice on that is order early because I don't know about you all, but I did try to order pizza from them a couple weeks ago and got closed out. So. But the Westfield Area Chinese American Association has donated masks and dollars toward this effort. So it's amazing. I wish that everyone in town could see, you know, all the individual contributions that have been happening. The mayor's doing a good job at trying to keep all of us posted in her, you know, daily updates, but it's just everywhere. The Feed the Front Line effort has raised over $85,000, you know, from local residents, and then, you know, supported the restaurants who are then supporting our, you know, frontline healthcare workers and others who are keeping, you know, long hours and, you know, working under very tenuous situations.
And that was Michelle and Stephen Boyce who started Feed the Front Line, and myself and Councilman Katz have been actively working with Feed the Front Line. So that's a great story there.
I agree. For those who may need some, you know, extra information, we've also really bolstered the Mental Health Council page on the town website. And we're promoting very heavily our stigma-free behaviors in town, compassion, acceptance, kindness, and empathy, which spells cake. So you'll see in our new logo, you'll be starting to see that more and more often around town. The Lifelong Westfield group in town is making an effort to call seniors on a regular basis and helping them to facilitate, you know, senior online chats to help them feel better connected when a lot of them live by themselves and feel very isolated at this time. We also really need to recognize the Downtown Westfield Corporation and the Rec Department for all of their efforts to move in-person events to virtual experiences, which have you know, helped parents keep kids occupied and kept our businesses, you know, active and engaged with the community. The Westfield Police Department, under the great leadership of Chief Badaloro, has also been delivering food and essentials to all of those in need. The Green Team's even taken their Earth Month virtual, which was, you know, disappointing to them at first because they had so many in-person events planned, but they've done a really incredible job of, you know, bringing all those things to us in virtually. And then, you know, the last block here, you know, just starts to make a little shout out to groups like the Saturday Fun Club, who are gathering groceries and delivering to 80 families last Saturday, and rainbows and balloons and chalk drawings and grocery delivery and sewing circles, making masks and PPE. I mean, it's everywhere. And so it really is important for us to keep remembering, that this is the community that's going to get us through all of this. And, the budget may be a little, we might have had to tighten our belts a little bit on it, but we're doing that just to be conservative and to make sure that, we're in good shape to face whatever else might be thrown at us.
Hey, Linda, one thing to add for Feed the Front, this Councilman contract, for Feed the Frontline, they also have an auction of, I think, local services and other opportunities that you can bid on, and that money's going to
Oh, that's great.
Frontline as well. So I think there's more information. I'm sure we can post the link. And I also, if you're a senior, the first virtual discussion is this Friday about how you're getting through the crisis, and you can share your tips with other seniors.
Okay, excellent, great. And definitely check out the website on a regular basis. One person who we should absolutely acknowledge tonight is our public information officer, Kim Ford, who is working very closely with Mike Beelan, who manages, our website to keep all of the information that everyone needs to know about up to date on the website. So, please use all the resources that they are making available to us every day. And then, on the further good news front, this last slide is just a quick recap of, all of the things that are still going on that we have as, ongoing efforts to, look at redevelopment and rehabilitation in our downtown. You'll remember from our last meeting that we now have a redevelopment study ongoing for our 8 municipal parking lots and the Lord and Taylor property, to help invite the investment in those properties that will, as the mayor mentioned up front, shift the burden of our revenues from our taxpayers onto, other businesses and activities that can be invited into town. We're, as Jim mentioned, we're working on the pathways in Mindawaskin and the Sycamore Playground because we have grants and other monies, already allocated for those things. Road paving will continue this year and is already started. If for all of you who have been driving Mountain Avenue, that's already well underway, and taking advantage of the good weather that we've been having. Planning board meetings and a lot of other town meetings are all, been shifted to virtual formats. And we have approved a plan to declare the whole special improvement district, our Westfield downtown, as an area in need of rehabilitation. And that means that we will be creating ways for property owners to invest in their buildings with tax abatements that we can offer to them. The land use element and circulation plans are also ongoing. And, we'll look at all those ways that we can further implement our master plan and get on top of those top recommendations as quickly as possible. And the wetland study in Tamaulipas is also underway so that we can, further look at, how we can utilize the space at Tamaulipas to our best advantage. And Jim mentioned earlier that the coffee kiosk is hopefully going to be opening as soon as we're back to physical work. So in closing, I just want to reiterate a couple of things about the fact that this is a budget plan that you're seeing tonight. One that was established in light of a lot of unknowns. And that means that the Finance Policy Committee, who usually gets a little bit of a break at this time of year, is not going to get one. But we'll look forward to, working very closely with Jim and Scott to evaluate, where we stand, and when we need to make decisions about a pool opening or, events and things like that, we'll be looking at them to make sure that we're, offering all the services that we can to town, taking into account, safety and health advice that we're getting. And that once we get on the other side of this crisis, we want to be delivering to all of you all those things that we've been talking about and planning for a number of years. And, we will be well prepared to, continue to enjoy this wonderful town that we live in. So I think at this point we can, wrap up the formal part of the presentation. I'll just remind everyone, that the budget at westfieldnj.gov email address is open for anyone who wants to send us questions after tonight. This presentation and the budget itself will be posted on the website, assuming that we approve tonight to do so. And I guess, Jim, are we going to open up to questions right now or wait until public comment period? I'm not certain about that.
I think we normally plan to open up the questions right now based upon the presentation. So let me take a look at the attendees and see if anyone has any questions. If anyone has any questions, you can actually virtually raise your hand about the budget presentation. If not, there'll be other public comment opportunity later in the meeting as well.
Jim, it's Mark. I just want to ask a question. I know in the past we always touted the AAA bond rating, and I know you always felt comfortable with a $10 million surplus. Now with the surplus down to approximately $7 million, what would be the criteria to keep that AAA bond rating?
Well, the bond rating agencies, we had a AAA bond rating before we had $10 million in surplus. I think we had at the time, I can't remember what year it was, we had about 5 or 6 million. So I think what they look at is they like to see 15 to 20% of your budget, and we are still there. But I think, at this point, reality is I feel very good that we have 7 million going into next year under the circumstances. I have a lot of peers of mine around the state that I'm getting emails saying, oh, we're going to spend all our surplus just to get through the year. So yes, I mean, I always want to have more surplus, but having 7 million going to 2021, I think is a pretty good spot considering where we could have been. The fact that we had to cut down a lot of revenue projections, but we were able to cut expenses this year. But I think the credit rating agencies will be fine with us still having 15% of our budget going forward. But we're going to be mindful of that when we go out to the bond market, when we do that, if we have to.
Right. Jim, I think it's also worth mentioning that, if you go back, we can go back and take a look at the slide of the, evolution of surplus. But when we talk about the surplus at this time in the planning of the budget year, this is when we're taking some monies out of the surplus to, invest as we need to invest those dollars and to help manage the tax rate. But over the course of the year, if we're planning well, and we've done that, that gets replenished. So last year we had a significant replenishment back up to $11.5 million. And, if you look over at the patterns over time, that replenishment is pretty reliable, at least in the, $1.5 to $2 million range. And so, but I also agree, and we've had conversations with Warren Korecki over the years about how, we maintain that AAA bond rating. We want to try to manage the level of the surplus, not only, to be a part of what the rating agencies look at when they rate a town, but also keep in mind that particularly in times like this, we don't really want to be, holding on to money of the taxpayers that is more than what we really need. And I think we're in a really good position right now.
So we do have one question that was submitted to Q&A, and the question is from Brendan Murray. How much of the Union County tax revenue comes back to Westfield what is our percentage of contribution to overall revenue of Union County? And why don't we have better representation on the county platforms given our contribution level? So those are county questions. I will say it's important to note that this year the county has announced that they are issuing a 0% tax increase for their budget. It doesn't necessarily mean that that means 0% for every community in the county, because how the taxes are apportioned. So we're still waiting for the specific number for Westfield, but it's good news for the taxpayers that we'll have it looks like close to a flat budget for the county. And some of those other questions he asked, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I can get back to him with those specifics. But again, it's important to note Westfield and Summit, City of Summit, are the two largest contributors to Union County because we are both Westfield and Summit have the highest property tax values in all the county. And that's part of how the formula works. But I'm happy to say that, Freeholder Mary Mooted has been involved in lots of things we've been doing recently. And she's been a good representation for us. She's from Westfield, which is the first time that's happened in a long time. So, but again, from a budget perspective, looks like 0% for the county, which will affect us in a positive way. It's another question by Doug McNeil asking, since the library is closed, any plans to ask the library to contribute money to the town? Answer to that is the library contributes quite a bit of money. We actually bill them for lots of services we provide. But right now, there's no other further contributions that's being considered. As a matter of fact, I know the Library Board of Trustees is looking at ways they can save money as well. The library, like other entities, they have a required amount of money that's determined each year by the state that they have to receive from each municipality. So right now we have to pay them the full amount, and they can obviously choose not to spend some of that. But right now, the annual allotment to the library will be going to them. And then the Library Board of Trustees is working hard to see where they can save some costs since they are closed. Those are two questions I had via the Q&A. And then on the participant list, I don't see anyone raising their hand there to ask any questions at this time. So unless the council has any other questions, any other questions? I guess we can move to the next step.
Jim, it looks like there might be one more question that came in.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Trying to understand the budget. It appears, this is from Ray Gargiulo. Trying to understand the budget. It appears the impact of COVID-19 is a reduction of $1.2 million in revenue. I understand that may change as we move forward, but am I correct? And the answer is yes. We did cut out about $1.2 million of revenue since the pandemic hit. That is correct. And again, that's our assumption at this point, based upon multiple months of less revenue coming in various locations, parking, court, construction, to name a few. And of course, if we get less than that, we'll have to change our spending and plan. If we get more than that, again, same as Linda mentioned before, we'll change the plan to ramp up some things as well. Check the participants one more time.
Yeah, maybe we should leave one more minute for people to type.
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, we can leave. Yeah. No other hands up on the participant list yet, so we'll wait. Hold on. There's a email that, or a question that came in on the chat. What about the tax increase on the average home? This is from Matt Kadosh from Tap Into. We actually have on the average assessed home in Westfield, which is about $796,000 assessment. This is going to be about $4.50 a month, a little over $50 per year for the town purposes, this budget. So there's another question that came in. Mr. Gargiulo asked a second question, is so that $1.2 million offset by the reduction in capital funding, Partially, yes, we did reduce the funding in the capital improvement fund, but we cut other funding as well. And so, yes, it is partially cut by that expense, capital improvement fund. Checking the list one more time, Mayor, of the people that are attendees. I don't see any other hands up. Wait, one more question. That's it. So I have a question or a comment here from Drew Escaldi. She would like to thank the council members and committees specifically for all their hard work in doing the budget, not once, but twice. Thank you, Drew.
And Jim, there was one other comment that came in as it related to our silver linings, that the frontline, the Feed the Frontline group is also selling lawn signs now for $10 to help support the undertaking. So
Oh yeah, I missed that. That's right, someone Michael Esposito looks like. Lawn signs are available for Feed the Frontline here. Okay, so we can.
It's free. feedthefrontlinenj.com silent auction.
Gotcha. Okay.
Wait, it looks like we might have one more question.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else, Linda?
That's it. No, I don't see anything else.
I don't see
Oh,
anything else either.
there's a comment on the chat,
Okay.
I think.
Oh, yes, there.
Mr. Greg
Can you
Casco,
read it?
thank you for providing 70 hours of the Conservation Center.
Oh, got it. Okay, great.
That'll start again this Saturday, and we'll continue for the rest of the season. And we hope that we'll be able to go back to Sundays as well, but at least this Saturday we'll begin. All right, I think we can end that portion of the meeting. There are other public comment portions, and move on to the next step of, I guess, the
Advertised hearings.
yes, advertised hearings.
And before we go to that, I do, a huge shout out to Councilor Linda Hapgood and Chair of the Finance Committee, and certainly everybody on the committee, and Councilman LaGrippo and Parmalee and Contract. But Linda, I know how much time and effort you have put into that in your leadership on this, and your insight and your professional experience is really invaluable. And I hope the community recognizes what an incredible asset we have in your diligence in doing this. And Jim, I see it every day. I used to see it every day. Now I just see it virtually.
I hear about it.
Every day. Exactly. I know it behind the scenes, how much work, and all the department heads, really, thanks to all of you for working together to bring, I think, what could have been a really, really challenging year, which will be, but I also talked to a lot of mayors, and I have an incredible appreciation for the strong position we're in. So thanks to all of you, and to you in particular. So,
and just to thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say one thing too. Back to Councilman LaGrippo's question. It was a good question about the AAA rating. One thing I forgot to mention, but it's important, and it ties into what you just said. We are very fortunate here. Part of a AAA rating is about having a very strong management team and having a council willing to act accordingly. And those are big factors, not just how much money you have in the bank. And so it all comes together. But there's a lot of questions on bond rating calls about what's your management style, what's your management strategy, what kind of team do you have, what kind of council do you have, does the council support the management team? And we're very fortunate. So I want to thank everybody on the council. We're in good shape right now, but it's important because that's some of the intangibles you can't get everywhere. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jim. It's great teamwork, and I never thought I would say that I missed those long meetings in town hall with the Finance Policy Committee, but I kind of do now. So, thank you, David and Mark for all of your dedication and hours to this, particularly the deputy of the committee, David Contract. You've been really helpful. Thank you so much.
All right, so we are ready. So, Mrs. Rowley, do we have any advertised hearings?
Yep, there are 6 advertised hearings tonight. The first is for General Ordinance Number 2162, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield regarding ground-mounted air conditioning equipment. Anyone wishing to be heard on General Ordinance Number 2162, please virtually raise your hand to make your comment. Be sure to include your name and address. And again, these are comments for General Ordinance 2162.
Just checking, Tara, give me a minute to check all the people. Anyone raises their hand? Looks like nobody's raising their hand.
Okay, Mayor, no comments. You can close the hearing.
This hearing is closed.
Next is General Ordinance Number 2163, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield regarding power generators. Anyone wishing to be heard on General Ordinance Number 2163, please virtually raise your hand to make your comment. Be sure to include your name and address. And this is for General Ordinance Number 2163.
Checking right now for anybody. Nobody?
Okay, seeing no one, Mayor, may I close the hearing?
This hearing is closed.
The third is General Ordinance Number 2164, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield pertaining to permitted yard encroachments. Anyone wishing to be heard on General Ordinance Number 2164, please virtually raise your hand to make a comment. Be sure to include your name and address for the record. And this is for General Ordinance Number 2164.
Checking now. Don't see anybody.
Okay, seeing no one, Mayor, may close the hearing.
This hearing is closed.
Next is General Ordinance Number 2165, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield, revising the submission requirement for preliminary and final site plan and subdivision applications. Anyone wishing to be heard on General Ordinance Number 2165, please virtually raise your hand to make your comment and be sure to include your name and address. This is for General Ordinance Number 2165.
Checking now. Nobody.
Seeing no one, Mayor, may close the hearing.
This hearing is closed.
General Ordinance Number 2166, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield, listing all zone districts. Anyone wishing to be heard on General Ordinance Number 2166, please virtually raise your hand to make your comment. Be sure to include your name and address for the record. And these are comments for General Ordinance Number 2166.
Checking now. No one's raising their hand.
Okay. Seeing no one, Mayor, may close the hearing.
This hearing is closed.
And the last hearing is for General Ordinance Number 2167, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield regarding notice of hearings. Anyone wishing to be heard on General Ordinance Number 2167, please virtually raise your hand, make your comment, and include your name and address for the record. Again, this is for General Ordinance 2167.
Checking and nobody.
Okay, seeing no one, Mayor, may close the hearing.
This hearing is closed. Councilwoman Mackey, please move for the adoption of ordinances.
You're on mute, Dawn, on mute. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move for the adoption of General Ordinance Number 2162 on second reading, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield regarding ground-mounted air conditioning equipment.
Can I have a second?
Contract second.
Second by Councilman Contract. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Habgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrippo,
Yes.
Councilman Katz,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyes,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes. This motion is carried.
I would also like to move for the adoption of General Ordinance Number 2163 on second reading, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield regarding power generators.
May I have a second?
Dardia, second.
Seconded by Councilman Dardia. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Habgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrepo,
Yes.
Councilman Katz,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried.
Next, I would like to move for the adoption of General Ordinance Number 2164 on second reading, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield pertaining to permitted yard encroachments.
May I have a second?
Second by Habgood.
Councilwoman Hapgood. Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Habgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrepo,
Yes.
Councilman Katz,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried.
I would also like to move for the adoption of General Ordinance Number 2165 on second reading, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield, revising the submission requirement for preliminary and final site plan and subdivision applications.
May I have a second?
Second by Habgood.
Seconded by Councilwoman Hapgood. Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Habgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrepo,
Yes.
Councilman Katz, Councilman Katz,
Yes. Can't hear.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried.
I would like to move for the adoption of General Ordinance Number 2166 on second reading, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield, listing all zone districts.
May I have a second?
Dardia, second.
Seconded by Councilman Dardia. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Habgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrepo,
Yes.
Councilman Katz,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried.
Lastly, I would like to move for the adoption of General Ordinance Number 2167 on second reading, an ordinance to amend the land use ordinance of the town of Westfield regarding notice of hearings.
May I have a second?
Contract second.
Seconded by Councilman Contract. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Habgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrepo,
Yes.
Councilman Katz,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia, Councilman Dardia, Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the Town Council Conference Session on regular meeting of April 14, 2020?
So moved.
Mac,
So moved by Councilman Boyce. Second?
Second.
second by Councilor LaGrepo. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? This motion is carried. Mrs. Riley, do we have any petitions or communications?
No, Mayor.
Now it's time for open discussion by citizens. Please virtually raise your hand to make your comment on any subject on which we have jurisdiction, and be sure to state your name and address for the record.
And now, Mayor, we'll see. We have, hello, Bob? Bob?
Am I on mute now, or?
You can talk. Give your name and address, please.
Okay, I'm Bob.
Hold on.
He's
Yeah.
back on mute.
Unmute. You there, Bob?
Hear you.
Bob, you're on mute. You need to unmute.
I'm hitting unmute and it's not working. Yeah, Bob.
Bob, if you are looking, I'm not sure how you've dialed in, but if you look at the bottom of your screen, maybe scroll over it, you should see a microphone with a red line through it.
He's off. He's on.
It says temporarily unmuted.
Oh, you're good, Bob.
Oh, he's back on mute.
Send this in as a Q&A.
No, there you go. Go ahead, Bob.
We have you, Bob.
Okay. I'm Bob Pinero. I'm at 228 Grove Street. I just want to follow up on the park closings. Mayor Brindle, you seem to indicate that you are mostly guided by the governor's, when the governor decides to open the state and county parks and the number of infections in Westfield. But other towns, including Jersey City, New Providence, and Summit, are opening their parks, even if it's only just for exercise purposes. So why can't you be focused a little more on looking at what might be best for Westfield as opposed to kind of, relying on what the governor wants to do? I guess that's really my main question.
Well, it's time for public comment, but I'll just say I'm relying on the governor for overall guidance, but I'm not necessarily driven by when they decide to open is going to be dictating when we decide to open. And what you had suggested about let's do what's best for Westfield is exactly the approach that we're taking. And so our decision is guided by a lot with the police chief and what they feel like their ability is to manage. And we didn't, in spite of what people might have thought they observed when the parks were open, there was a significant amount of non-compliance, and the chief can speak to that directly. So I think most importantly, honestly, we're guided by what is happening indeed in Westfield, what our capacity is to enforce, and what the cases indicate based upon community spread. That may or may not coincide with the decision by the governor of when they want to open up the state and the county. It certainly would be helpful for us if they would open up the county parks, so we feel like at least there would be more options for residents to go. But it is not necessarily driven by that decision at all, and we talk about it regularly.
In terms of what you can do in the park and congregating. I mean, you could just close the parks for sports activities, basketball, put tape around the basketball hoops and stuff like that. And essentially, let's say, open up Tamaqua Park, just the loop road for running, biking, and walking, that sort of thing. And
yeah, and that's what
stuff.
And that's what I indicated in my opening remarks, is that we'll probably end up opening the parks exactly as we close them. And that was gradually, limiting it, ultimately closing the basketball courts and playgrounds and so forth. So yeah, I think the opening will be exactly as you're suggesting, for a very limited exercise and so forth like that. But we're not there yet at a point where we feel like we're at the community is there yet from a health perspective, and we don't think we're there yet from a compliance or an enforcement perspective. But I mean, like I said, we're going to make our decision what is best on Westfield, and not necessarily what's driven by anybody else. But thank you for your comment.
Mayor, this is Councilman LaGrippo. Chief, I think the mayor mentioned earlier there's drones in the park. Do you know who authorized that or how that came to fruition?
Yes, they're police department drones. We have 2 certified operators, FAA Part 107 operators, and just like anything else, we're constantly looking for new technology for use in police work. They are police department drones being operated by police officers.
Anybody else, Jim?
Don't see anybody. Let me check again. Hold on, I got a few more.
And there's 2 more.
Okay, is it?
Emily Root and Douglas McNeil.
Emily?
Oh, hey guys, I just wanted to thank you. We are so lucky to have you in office and just taking care of us. I feel so good. I know the park thing will be figured out in time, Mayor Brindle and Town Council. And we're also so impressed with the budget presentation, Councilwoman Habgood and Jim. Thank you guys so much. And the fact that we still have a $7 million surplus, even during these unprecedented times. I just can't say how impressed I am. And I know my friends and other neighbors are talking about it right now. So thank you guys so much for all you're doing for us.
Emily, just provide your address.
Oh, I'm sorry, Emily Root, 738 Mountain Ave.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you, Emily. Next person is Mr. McNeil, Doug McNeil.
This is Doug McNeil, 624 Kimball Avenue. Because the parks are closed, when I ride my bike, obviously I ride in the streets through town, and I notice a problem, especially today because it's a nice day. Many of the people who are out walking, instead of using sidewalks where there are sidewalks, are walking in the roads, often 2 abreast. So for social distancing, that means I've got to swing out way into a traffic line to go by them. So I'm wondering if maybe the mayor could communicate in her letter that people should use the sidewalks if they're available, and maybe walk single file when they aren't on the sidewalk. Something to make it a little safer. I certainly don't want to have an incident with a car.
Thank you, will do.
Okay, don't see anybody else yet. Another a few seconds. Hold on, we have looks like nobody else, Mayor.
Okay, so hearing no other comments or seeing any other hands, I close this portion of the meeting and move to bills and claims. So Councilwoman Hapgood.
Still on mute, Linda.
You're on mute. Linda?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I had all the wrong screens up. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move bills and claims in the amount of $146,317.79.
May I have a second?
Parmalee, second.
A second by Mark Parmalee. Councilman Parmalee, any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? This motion is carried. Next on the agenda is reports of standing committees, beginning with the Finance Policy Committee. So Councilwoman Hapgood.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 7 resolutions, 4 of which I'd like to move as a package. The first is a resolution authorizing the CFO to refund Recreation Department fees. The second, a resolution authorizing an award of contract for pool concession. Third, resolution providing for self-examination of the 2020 municipal budget. And a fourth, resolution to defer the local district school tax.
May I have a second?
Parmalee, second.
Second by Councilman Parmalee. Any discussion? All in favor? Yep.
I just like to note quickly that the pool concession obviously is, someone waiting the opening of the pool. And, we ultimately may need to make some adjustments to that, but there's no obligation that we're incurring as a result of accepting and entering into that contract.
So all in favor?
Yes.
I'd just like to make a comment on the 2020 municipal budget.
Hold on, let's get these voted on real quick, Mark.
I'm
You
sorry.
have this package of resolutions voted on quick?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll talk about the budget afterward.
Yeah. Just so we have a motion and a second, right?
Yeah.
So move.
Okay, so we're all in favor? Opposed?
Yes.
Yes.
This motion is carried. So Councilman Hapgood.
I'd like to move for the adoption of resolutions by roll call vote. The first is a resolution to extend the delinquency grace period on the payment of second quarter property taxes to June 1st, 2020.
May I have a second?
Second, Katz.
Second by Councilman Katz. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Hapgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrippo,
Yes.
Councilman Katz,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried.
Next, I'd like to move the resolution to introduce and approve the 2020 municipal budget.
May I have a second?
Second, contract.
I just want to make some comments on the budget. I'll be voting no on the budget. So, yeah, I just want to say it was great working with Councilwoman Hapgood, Councilman Contract, and Councilman Parmalee. Great experience being back on the Finance Committee. I really enjoyed working with everyone. As Jim said earlier, the budget is a roadmap. And prior to the virus situation, our tax increase was approximately 2.99%, and the surplus was down to about $7.5 million. So I know when Mayor Brindle came into office, the budget was approximately $14.5 million. So there were some things I would have liked to see from the town a little different. I would have liked to see some waiver on commuter parking. The conservation fee went up $10 this year. So I feel there's some things we could have done a little differently. And for example, I know Scotch Plains did a 0% tax increase this year. Many other municipalities around the state did the same. But I do respect everyone's efforts, and it's a good team. I just feel strongly that the previous 2 years I did vote with Mayor Brindle's budget. I thought they were, I felt comfortable at the time, but I was also assured by Mayor Brindle and Councilwoman Hapgood that the surplus would remain $9.5–10 million. Being on the council for 9 years, I know Jim always felt comfortably our town administrator with a $10 million surplus. And me personally, you know, it's the way I manage my personal finances. I would feel more comfortable with more of a surplus and do some of the capital improvements that we've talked about, especially with the parks and things of that nature. But that's how I feel. But, you know, I appreciate everybody. And again, thank you for the experience.
I'll just make a few comments because I know Councilwoman Hapgood's already shared her opinions about the budget. So, you know, I think this is a very good budget that takes a bad situation and actually presents a pretty good fiscal roadmap for the town, given some really difficult circumstances that obviously we're all facing. I do think it's really important for the whole public to recognize, Mark, I just want to address one of your comments about the surplus. So, you know, we have to realize that the surplus is measured at different points in time. So at the beginning of the year, the surplus is $11.5 million. In this budget, it does go down to $7 million. But we've talked about it multiple times tonight. The surplus naturally regenerates as we move through the year. So we have to look at the surplus on the same dates. If we look at the surplus at the end of a year and then at the beginning of the next budget year, that's actually not apples to apples, and it's really bad budgeting, you know, in terms of, you know, evaluating it. So my expectation, if you look at the chart that we showed in terms of surplus regeneration, this town typically regenerates $1 to $2 million per year. So I don't think it's fair to say the surplus is going down to $7 million. it should get back. And I think it will get back to probably 9 million, which again, as we came into office, we heard loud and clear from voters that having 14.5 million of their money not doing much was just not the right amount. And the fiscal experts that we talked to, like our accountant and our bond counsel, was very comfortable taking it down to the 9 to 10 million range. And that's really always been my goal. We should be around 9 million. And I believe we're going to get there. So I think the town did a very good job tightening its belt. There's more that could be done if necessary. I'll definitely support this budget because I think it's a good roadmap for the town given the situation.
Yeah, David, I know you're well documented saying you're comfortable with a $9 to $10 million surplus. I mean, it's just going to be difficult for the town to generate that revenue this year. And next year, people are already talking about appealing their taxes because house values are going down. So, I mean, next year is really going to be the tough year. So,
Councilman Grippo, can I just ask the questions? I was a bit confused by your comments because you said two things. You said, one, you indicated that it would have been nice to have a 0% municipal levy, but you also said you wish we had had more surplus. How would you have suggested we would have gone about doing that, knowing that you have voted for the budget for the last 2 years? What was your solution for getting to both of those things that you mentioned?
well, I mean, with all due respect, when you took office, there was a $14.5 million surplus. Obviously, revenues went down in a great economy, which honestly, I don't think that should have ever happened, but it did. We weren't generating the revenue we should. The expenses, consulting fees, and just for instance, the town attorney's expenses went up 40%. So those are concerns that I have, and that's the way I feel. I'm doing this 9 years. The way I tell people, a lot of people manage their house differently. Some people buy a big house and a house poor, but they live above their means. I feel a lot of the past 2 years, the town has lived beyond its spending more than taking in, and that's a reduction in $7.5 million in about 2.5 years. So you could, question the way I feel, but that's my opinion, and that's what I've seen.
And I respect that, and I don't question the way you feel. I just question your logic. And I think one thing, when it was very loud and clear when we came in, is what people were questioning is why the town was maintaining such an excessively large surplus while we had a very specific deterioration in our infrastructure. And people couldn't understand why we would be bragging about a $12 million surplus while roads were unpaved, sidewalks were cracked, downtown was a mess. And quite frankly, that's what got me elected. So I'm only delivering on the promises that I made 2 years ago about being smarter and more strategic. And I'll just go back about, you are absolutely right. We made intentional decisions not to generate revenue that undermined good long-term policy. And I think you, having been there for 9 years, not always on the finance committee, I understand, but you know what the sources of revenue were. They were parking tickets. Ask anybody, you know that, which undermined absolutely the success of our downtown. And we intentionally took down parking tickets to the tune of about $150,000. They've been through tear down permits. And as we know loud and clear, the town is sick of watching these houses being torn down, and their road opening permits are big contributors to discretionary revenue. So yes, we have reduced revenue intentionally on those because they're not sustainable for the long term, the quality of life. So, and I do take a little personal offense at this notion about how you manage your pocketbook, because that's how I manage my pocketbook too. But I definitely believe that we are a vibrant and growing town that needs to invest in growth strategies for the future. And that is something that has been particularly lacking over the last 10 years. So I guess it is a very difference in philosophy, but I believe our best days are ahead of us, and we need to, and I believe in the possibilities of this town, and we need to invest appropriately. So $7 million by any other town metrics is actually really, really, really great. And I think this $10 million metrics is somewhat artificial. As Jim said, there was no, when you started 9 years ago, there was no $10 million surplus. That's a new phenomenon. So to imply, I'm not finished. So to imply that this $10 million metric is something that you've been raising the flag for the last 10 years is not right. So this
Yeah,
is a
but-
new thing, and actually, like I said, it's gone through undermining really what, and if, honestly, what people were telling us, I don't want the money sitting in a bank earning 1%. If that's what it's going to do, either invest it in our roads, invest it in structure, or give it back to me. And you know what? That is
Right, but-
exactly what we've done.
With all due respect, Mayor, most of the roads last year were done by the gas company, and you know that.
Well, Mark, excuse me, let me say this. Who cares, right? 8 miles, by the way,
We
8 miles.
we didn't pay for it.
Right, 8 miles of those roads were done by us. But what my point is, that arrangement that we had with Elizabethtown Gas could have been done years ago.
Oh, I think it was a great thing, but I'm saying.
But
we
my
didn't pay
councilman,
for
what
it.
I'm saying is, if someone had been thinking innovatively and rethinking what our partnerships are, those roads could have been paid on someone else's dime years ago. So I actually think it's amusing that actually you would have been able to throw back that, oh my gosh, those roads don't count because you got somebody else to pay for them. I actually think
It didn't come out of our. It didn't come out of our
excuse
pocket.
me, I actually think that's pretty brilliant. And I actually think that is the innovative approach we're taking to all of our budget. So, you know, we actually paid for 8 miles of roads last year, which is still 4 more miles than any of the town had been done previously. But we actually got 20 miles out of it. So I actually think that is a perfect example of the type of innovative thinking we're talking about, making our dollars go further.
Okay, but what about the coffee kiosk, right? It's going to be about 120,000.
But you know what else? Can I tell you something else we heard?
What's the break even? What's the break even on that?
Councilman, let me just tell you, this is another thing in terms of how the lack of innovative thinking that actually existed before we came.
Yeah, but what's the? Stop insulting me. What instead of
Councilman. So let me just say, what we have, the lack of innovative thinking regarding that is a moneymaker. The coffee kiosk is an opportunity to generate revenue for the town. So we're making an investment in a way that'll actually generate revenue for us for the long term. And that is something we heard a lot about when we were running. So my point is, I look at everything as an investment, as a way to generate revenue from the town. You got to invest money to make money. And that is something the town had never done.
Okay, but now it's a rainy day fund, and we're not going to have the funds going forward the next 2 years.
You're actually, and I think what you heard loud and clear tonight is that we're in actually very good shape.
I don't know. But anyway, so you talk about the kiosk. Now, what's the break-even analysis for that?
Well, I think
we haven't put it out for bid yet.
Yeah, we haven't been out.
Yeah, but that's great. But what's the break-even analysis?
Let's just say it's a 3-year ROI, right? That's pretty good. And so but you don't know until you get the RFQ back, right? But my point is, Mark, so is the question then, don't even try? Because there's never going to make any money. But my point is, that thing had been sitting vacant, and one thing we heard is like, that's a money maker. It had been sitting vacant for 5 years. You know what we're going to tackle next? The train station. Talk about an asset that's not generating any revenue for the town, right? So why is it sitting there, not generating revenue, and we own it? So my point is, everything that we look at is an opportunity to make money, revenue for the town.
Well, I'm saying 2.5, 3 years, whatever it is, $7.5 million. I still don't see fields. We're not any closer to having any type of field project done. And I mean, I'm obviously, a big proponent. My 2 kids play field sports, and I want to see something done with the field.
And so do I. For sure.
Yeah, but can I, Mark, I think it's really important that we have to put things, we have to talk about things in the proper way. So when you say 14.5 million to 7 million and we've got no field.
But David, that is the proper
way. Councilman, wait a second. Don't interrupt, please. All right, I waited till you finished, but I think it's important that the residents and the public understand, if you just say the surplus has gone from 14 to 7.5, and what did we get for it? Well, I'll remind everybody that they got, a 0% tax increase last year, 0.5% the year before, far lower than anything, Mark, that you've been on the council. And even with this tax increase, it still averages out to 0.8% over the last 3 years. That's what people said to us. Like, don't sit on the money, either return it to us directly or through lower taxes. And we did that and invested. Still have, and again, don't use 7 million because you know that as a red herring. It's not 7 million. The right number is the number at the end of the year, not the beginning of the year. So every time you say 7 million, I'm going to jump in because it's the wrong number to use. You're trying to mislead people. And I don't think that's appropriate. We need to lead with facts. We need to lead with facts that are presented in an apples to apples way. So the public, don't listen to anybody who says the surplus went from 14.5 down to 7. It's not an apples to apples comparison.
Well, I think, Councilman, we're grateful for your contributions. I am puzzled by sometimes by your decisions that last year versus this year, but it's your respectfully right to do those. And to me, the purpose of a big surplus is a rainy day fund for exactly situations like this.
Well,
So
I mean, honestly, last year you and Councilwoman Hackwood said we're $9.5, $10 million at the surplus level. This year we're at 7. So that's my major decision.
all right, well, I guess someone has to pick up that mantle on your side. So, all right, so
It's hard, yeah, and I guess it's also important to say that, Councilman, the comments that you're making about trying to reduce costs to the residents obviously would have an even greater negative impact on, the amount of surplus that we have. So all of these things are balanced. When we took a look at the budget for this year, we're trying to balance between, a tax levy and utilizing the capital that we have at our disposal. And we're always taking the best interests of the residents in mind. We've spent a lot of time together, and we will continue to spend more time together as we go through this year. So if there are ideas that you have about ways that we can bring in new revenue to the town, I haven't heard them yet, but I'm all ears.
and I think I'm sorry, Councilwoman Mackey's been trying to speak.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I just want to speak to the kiosk because it's a project that I feel very strongly about. And when we're discussing in terms of potential.
Dawn, can you hear us?
Dawn, you cut out, Dawn. Can she hear us? Back. We lost you.
Councilwoman Hackwood, Linda, I was just going to say, honestly, if I thought the town finances.
Councilman, let's give Councilwoman Mackey a chance to.
She lost
She
her
can't,
audio.
no, I'm just going to say I feel if the finances were managed a little better this past year, we'd be in a little better position to help the residents more. And that's how I feel. And all of you can just gang up on me and say I got to carry.
All that I would do, Councilman, is encourage you to raise these points when we're having meetings.
Well, I did.
Instead of raising them when we're trying to present the budget, because it's not really a time that we can incorporate these ideas when you're waiting until now to raise them with us.
You know my concerns.
As we go forward,
I mean, as of Sunday afternoon, I was pushing for the what Governor Murphy did today, and the only reason why you decided to do it is
actually, yeah.
Sunday you said no, we're not going to do that. So, right. Right.
Okay.
I mean, right. I mean, to be honest, I mean.
Okay, so we can talk about a memo that we discussed on Sunday afternoon that we received from the state that raised a lot of concerns about doing anything about extending a grace period for the collection of second quarter taxes, or reducing the cost, the penalties associated with those until the state made a change. Today, there is an executive order by the governor that gave us the ability to offer relief to the taxpayers for another 20 days until the 1st of June. So the information that became available to us today was very critical in that decision making. As of Sunday, when we discussed it, the very, very strong advice from the DCA, from the state, was that it would be completely ill-advised for us to do anything until the state made a change, which they did today. And
Right.
then
I know, but
immediately, within hours. So I don't know how we can be more proactive in trying to make a difference for the residents of this town.
Yeah, I know, but I'm on the League of Municipalities and Taxation and Finance Committee, and municipalities across the state were doing it on their own. You know, we met Sunday, no one on the committee wanted.
Mark, that's not accurate.
It's not accurate, I'm on the tax.
Actually, Councilman, we'll move on, but just so you know, the person that I was talking to was Mayor Colleen Marr, who was president of the New Jersey League of Municipalities, and she was the one that was advising me on what we should do. So I feel like there's
Colleen was all forward doing it, and then she pulled back.
Until not, because she realized they acted prematurely. And so, and it doesn't matter. It's here or there. We all able to do what was best for the time.
The message at the end of the day, the message to the residents of Westfield is that we're doing everything we can, to help people get through this crisis, by managing a budget, by keeping a strong nest egg, to do and taking whatever actions we can to take the pressure off of people who are suffering from, economic complications associated with this pandemic.
And I'm sorry, my Councilman Parmalee wants to speak.
Yeah, it's so I'm new to the Budget Committee, obviously, or the Finance Committee. I want to say, Mark, it was a year ago when you announced your candidacy, and you said, in announcing it, that you wanted to point out your ability to reach across the aisle, and you noted that we, meaning both sides, have maintained a fiscally responsible agenda, working together. You voted in favor of that zero municipal tax increase last year, so you knew what the spending would be over the course of the year. I have to say, I found working with you in the course of the Finance Committee meetings, I thought we got along very well. I think we're losing sight of a few things. One of them is that the budget this year is actually less than the budget last year, as far as the municipal use of the tax dollar goes. And that's because we had well over $1 million of non-discretionary increases in taxes. A lot of the stuff that you're proposing today that we really didn't have a discussion of during our meeting is stuff that would reduce the revenue that the town takes in. So for example, holding off on the interest, reducing fees for parking permits, and et cetera. To offset that loss of revenue that you're suggesting, which just doesn't make sense, we'd either have to spend more of the money that we have in the bank, or we'd have to increase taxes more. And so I think what we've gone through this over several meetings with all the budget heads, we've seen some really innovative approaches taken by the police department in leasing vehicles that reduced the cost of new vehicles, which they need, by almost 50%. And we've seen some really innovative approaches in reducing the numbers that we've come through. And I think throughout the course of this, we're at this point where, we have to, I think kind of the solution that we've arrived at after all these discussions really puts us in the best path forward. I mean, the reason that surplus is there is, it's just for instances just like this. And again, I really want to reiterate Mr. Contract's point that the $7 million today does not reflect what the surplus is going to be by the end of the year. So, I'd like you to just continue to work across the aisle like you said you were, and like I've seen in private. And so,
I agree, Mark. It's just, honestly, I feel like I was lied to last year when I was told the budget would remain 9.5, 10 million. And it didn't happen. I mean, for whatever reason, it didn't happen. So we move forward and, continue our working relationship.
Well, but
you guys could laugh, but it's the reality.
Mark, the reason why I'm laughing is that actually the surplus ended the year at 11.5 million. So yes, the commitment was that we would.
They're assuming, and then let's face it, a lot of capital projects are not going to get done this year. So I mean,
Mark, but you're trying to use facts to mislead people. Like the surplus, the surplus starts at one level and ends at a different level. It started last year lower, at 9, and it ended up lower than that, and ended up at 11.5. So I just think we have to be clear with people with the right facts and the right way to present it, so we don't people in this place.
So Councilman Contract and you know what, I'm just gonna try and reel this in. We could work on this. So Councilwoman Mackey is back, so I'd like to let her have the last word and then we'll move on.
I appreciate that. I just want to discuss the kiosk in terms of not just being a revenue generator. This is something that everyone coming through our town on that line sees, and for the last several years it was allowed to fall into decay, and that's a little historic structure, and I think that is a signal to the community. I know that it was something that I got so much outreach about. People are very excited. The commute is difficult, and having a cup of coffee and being able to grab breakfast, that's a quality of life thing. And when you $100,000 up against people's commutes and what it reflects on us as a town, to have something that's well cared for at our train station, that's an important thing. In light of the fact that I'm certain it's going to turn a revenue, even in light of where we are right now, I regularly have people asking me when the RFP is coming out. So I'm just going to say that I think that this is really important to the community. I stand by it. I'm sorry you don't see it that way, and I look forward to seeing that humming with activity when we all get back to normal. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so with that, we are moving on to voting on the introduction of the budget. So Ms. Rowley, please call the roll.
Councilwoman Hapgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrippo,
No.
Councilman Katz,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried.
Next, I'd like to move the resolution to introduce and approve the 2020. Oh, I already read that. Can we do it again?
Yes, I did.
Linda, the second one is the SIDS budget.
Yeah. The special improvement budget. Yeah, sorry, I apologize. I hadn't flipped the page. I'd like to move a resolution to introduce and approve the 2020 special improvement district budget.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Parmalee. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Hapgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrippo,
Yes.
Councilman Katz,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried.
Lastly, I'd like to move general ordinance number 2170 on first reading, an ordinance for calendar year 2020 to establish a cap bank under
Yes.
NZF.
Sorry. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Parmalee. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilwoman Hapgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrippo,
Yes.
Councilman Katz,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion is carried. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Dardia.
So moved by Councilman Dardia. Happy birthday. Second?
Second.
Second by
Mackey.
Councilman Parmalee. All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? This motion is carried. This meeting is adjourned. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good
night.
For all joining.
Everyone.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.